And there's a lot of talk about toxic feminine energy as well, or girls who are trying to be
Mm.
too much in their masculine and how that prevents them from finding a relationship where she can be in her
Mm.
feminine energy. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, again, I think a lot of times I think of it as like what our conditioning has done to perpetuate wounding within us. And so when people talk about like feminine energy as like toxic or like women
I mean,
being
it's
in
also
their,
for men. Sorry, toxic masculinity. That's also a
yeah,
huge topic right now.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's just a lot of us unpacking what the paradigms have been that have really created these energies where we feel like we like armored up and in so many ways it's like I think what we would think of as like women being too much in their masculine has been a survival strategy in a patriarchal culture where for centuries now we've
So
really been
true.
conditioned to believe like you can't trust in men, right? Like they're going to
Mm,
hurt you, they're going to cheat on you, they're going to like do all of these, maybe they'll burn you alive at the stake, like all of these various reasons
yeah,
that we've been conditioned, you know,
right.
sometimes with really good reason to not trust in men and masculinity. But I think there's a way that, similar to what we were just saying, our perception of reality is based on what we believe to be true. And so that if we believe that men are awful and I just have to like, I have to be the man and I can't trust in men and whatever the thing is in our relationship dynamics, then that will be our experience, right? And if we say like, no, you know, I believe that there are so many beautiful, soulful men, out here for me to attract. And I will maybe make friendships with men and be in relationships with men in other ways that sort of cultivate that sense of safety for me until I find something that feels aligned. Then I think we just have a different experience of what's possible for ourselves. But, you know, to the point I think you're making, I think for both men and women, there have just been survival strategies that have been passed down generationally that have really conditioned us to not be in right relationship with, I think, what all of us are seeking, which is that relational harmony.
That's really good advice for those who are feeling jaded right now in the
Mm,
dating world, because it is tough out there. And if
yeah.
you are constantly having experiences that are disillusioning,
Mm,
you will have a tendency to believe that all men will treat me in a bad way or all women are just going to take advantage of me. So I think that that's really good advice, what you just gave.
well, thank you. Yeah, you know, I often say I do believe that words are spells because there's power in the words that we speak and the resonance that they carry within us. And so it's like, you know, sometimes women will say to me like there are just no good men. And I'm like, "Oh,
Right.
that is a powerful spell you are casting there, sister." Like take a breath and just like think about what that felt like within you as you just said that, right? And how that might be sort of blocking your energy to be open to seeing the good men that may be around you, right? Like it's like that red car principle. I don't know if you've heard about that, but like if someone says to
Yeah, the
you,
reticular activating system,
yeah, like notice
referring
how
to
many
that.
red cars you see. You might not see
Yes.
any until you really start paying attention. But
Start
if you're
paying
like,
attention.
universe, show me all of the good men, show me all of the beautiful men. I am so open and hungry to see them. All of a sudden, it's like you're flooded with red cars in the form of men, right?
Sure. But until we do that work of fixing our wounded masculine and feminine energy, it would
Mm,
be tougher for us to recognize them, right? Because you said on a subconscious level, we'll still be attracted to those partners who may not be
yeah.
good for us.
Yeah, and you know, I am in such a kick lately, Celine, where I feel like I just feel like almost everybody needs like a giant timeout from the dating scene. And I'm joking when I say that, but I think we're just so conditioned to believe that we're incomplete until we're partnered that a lot of times we're making choices in terms of who we partner with that aren't aligned with our highest truth. And it's not to shame ourselves for doing it, but there's something that comes, you know, when we come from the space of scarcity and lack, we make choices based on that belief system, right? And so if we bring the focus back on ourselves and do some of that shadow work, some of the work that we're talking about to really feel like I'm worthy of all these things that I want, be in relationships with people without, so much of an agenda, and I can really meet this person soul to soul versus, the roles that we've been conditioned to play based on our gender. And I think we just have a very different experience of the type of people we meet in the world when we're coming from that soulful place.
And you did talk about the unspoken war of the sexes that play
Mm.
out in relationships. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
bit about that battle and why it's important for us to be aware of them?
Yeah, I think it's so much of what we've been talking about that there's a way that I think we normalize things like, wives competing for like whose husband is more useless than the other, like comments like, the old ball and chain is at home, and like, when someone's getting married, it's like he's gone now. It's a wrap, and like all of these things about what we're talking about in terms of like the way that we talk about our lives matter. But also, I think it's so much of what we've been talking about in terms of the ways that we've been conditioned for centuries to just feel like we need to be in these adversarial roles. And we've never really had a reckoning with aspects of who we've been to one another based on gender, that there are some pretty significant pain points around, right? I talk a lot about how so much of the research that's been done around couples work and couples therapy is still from origin points within the 70s. And in the 70s, women couldn't even have their own bank accounts, which really sort of impacts the way that I am having conversations about my relational fulfillment, right? If I know that my survival depends on me staying in this relationship, I might not be as honest about what is and isn't fulfilling with my relationship with my husband, right?
Could you please say
Um,
more about that? So you're saying that the vestiges of the past, the challenges that women had to face, especially monetarily, does that still lie within us in some way?
oh my gosh, of course. I mean, and I live in the United States where we've never had a female president, right? Like that there's been a way that,
Almost.
well, yeah,
You were
and
close.
and still yet, right?
Yeah.
And there are just ways that we've never had a reckoning with the things that, our mothers taught us as women about, how much we could trust in men or not, what we had to do to keep ourselves safe and be pleasing objects. Because a lot of what a patriarchal culture teaches women is that your worth is in being a pleasing object. So someone will choose you, and that your shelf life sort of expires at a certain age. And once you're past that age, you're no longer as valuable as you used to be, right? But we never really think about what that does between two people in terms of their intimacy when that is the foundation that our relationships start on, right? And so if we're sort of coming together based on me being a pretty object and you choosing me and me feeling like I have to, if I'm the man, protect, provide, and procreate, and that's my role, and my role is to be the pleasing object, which, so much of that has shifted even with women more in the workforce. And so in a lot of ways, we're just really struggling to identify like what does it mean to relate to one another without all of these societal gender roles that have been placed upon us, but also just really like who we are becoming as we are healing more and more. I think a lot of people are investing a lot of energy in becoming a more authentic self. But then what does that look like relationally? I think we're a generation of women that were really taught you can do anything, you can become anything you want to be. But we're living amongst a generation of men that nobody taught them how to be in relationship with that successful woman and not feel somehow diminished if she makes more and is the breadwinner in our family, right? And so a lot of what I work with couples is sort of grappling with some of those dynamics that we really haven't been conditioned to speak about, but they're very alive in the relationship dynamics and how we interact with one another.
How do you help those men understand that
Mm.
those archaic gender roles don't exist anymore and that they need to change the way they see women?
Well, it's tough, right? Because as much as we would we would like to say that those are a thing of the past, there's still like a lot of ways that I think patriarchy is sort of like in its last hurrah, like really sort of like thrashing and attempting to be
Well,
seen before it
not
dies, right?
not I wouldn't say that's the case in my culture. Like
Mm,
I'm from the Indian culture and even like the Arab culture, lots of Asian cultures in general, I think
hmm.
it's still quite embedded. So I mean it does show up in society.
Yeah, to be freeze.
But I would imagine in the Western world, it's
No,
definitely more evolved out there, and there's a growing acceptance of the new ways of being.
and I wouldn't necessarily say that. And even when I say like on its last stand, I mean in terms of like the larger cycle of our life. If we think about like the thousands of years of patriarchy, I think the rise of the feminine principle was sort of prophesized to start in the Aquarian age, which began in 2023. So we're sort
That's
of like
right.
right at the tip of that, right? But it's going to take some time, right? And so what we're
Yeah.
seeing is, you know, if you look at South Korea and the 4B movement, what that is about is the rise of the feminine principle and a like generation of women saying, you know, the misogyny is too much. It's too thick. We're out. We're like buying out. We don't want to get married. We're not going to have babies. Like we're done with this. And so to me, it's sort of like us seeing how these paradigms are shifting. But in the midst of that, we're still living with like incel groups and, you know, all of the podcasts of men talking about like, you know, alpha males and all of these things that really feel like a pushback on the
A
ways
few
that we had
names
sort of
pop in my
progressed.
mind as you speak.
Yes. Yeah, so those are the things that I mean when I say like it's like and its last stand like fighting to be seen and heard, and it's not so much like men are fighting. I think it's those structures of dominance are fighting to sort of have their voice here at the end as things are really shifting and we're all sort of grappling with like who are we going to be to one another if we want to sort of put down these outdated gender roles and meet one another in a little bit more of our humanity, right? But no, I don't think, I think sometimes it might be a little bit more below the surface in the West, but it's just as much there and prevalent. And for all of us to like, you know, have this reckoning with that I think we are right now.